On November 23rd, 1944, a Royal Air Force anti-aircraft unit stationed in Belgium observed B-17 Flying Fortress flying straight towards them. The massive US Air Force bomber approached at high speeds with its landing gear down. With no landing scheduled, the base personnel presumed it was an emergency landing situation and reacted accordingly. The Flying Fortress proceeded to execute the emergency landing by ploughing into a nearby field. Having just barely avoided crashing into the unit's guns, the aircraft's landing was so fast and uncontrolled that the propellers snapped off and both wings slapped into the earth during the descent. 3 engines continued rumbling, and the base personnel awaited what would clearly be a rattled crew. For over 15 minutes, the soldiers on the ground waited for the bomber's crew to appear. But no one left the damaged plane. After 20 minutes of nothing, Major John Crisp cautiously approached the B-17. Lacking knowledge of the aircraft, it took him a moment to find the entry hatch. Eventually finding the hatch under the fuselage, the Major opened it and entered the bomber alone. His own words best describe what he found. We now made a thorough search, and our most remarkable find was that the fuselage was a dozen parachutes neatly wrapped and ready for clipping on. This made the whereabouts of the crew even more mysterious. The Sperry bomb sight remained in the Perspex nose, quite undamaged, with its cover neatly folded beside it. Back on the navigator's guess, there was a code book, giving the colours and letters of the day for identification purposes. Various fur-lined flying jackets lay in the fuselage together with a few bars of chocolate, partially consumed in some cases. Amazingly, the B-17's crew was nowhere in sight. Not even their dead bodies remained in the bomber. The only significant clue seemed to be the last note in the code book: bad flak. Despite such a message, the only damage the bomber had sustained was from its landing. More to the point, the parachutes remained, meaning if anyone did bail out, they must have done so to certain death. The B-17 became known as a Phantom Fortress, and it took some time to form an idea of what might have occurred. The bomber itself was confirmed to be of the 91st Bombardment Group. The Phantom's last mission involved bombing oil refineries in Merseburg, Germany. During this mission, something went awry. The crew, amazingly, were found to be alive and accounted for in Belgium. According to them, the bomb rack had developed a problem. When they veered away from the group to resolve the issue, they took enemy fire, which further damaged the rack and took out one of the engines. The crew had decided to head for England, but when it became clear the bomber wouldn't make it, they decided to change course to Brussels, Belgium. Along the way, they discarded excess weight to keep the B-17 aloft. The Phantom continued to flounder, so the crew set the aircraft to autopilot and bailed out. The crew's story did not match the evidence, as the bomber seemed to suffer none of the damage they had described. Attempts to bridge the two are reasonably plausible, but still odd. The engines may have kicked back into working order on their own after the crew bailed. The initial investigators, lacking knowledge of the aircraft and only knowing of the flak damage from the exiting end, could have mistaken battle damage for crash damage. Though plausible, neither of those theories account for the crew's parachutes remaining on board. They also cannot explain how the bomber managed the most difficult aspect of flying, landing in somewhat of one single piece. The Phantom's unmanned crash landing was a first and left many wondering how it happened. How do you think it happened? Let me know in the comments below. Have a spooky one, and I shall see you next time.